to the board rather than to run on one issue or one particular challenge that I saw, because we might get riled up about that one thing, but we can't predict what the next, in this case now 3 years, will bring before my term expires. And so my question to those who were looking at candidates was, who do you want involved in those conversations? Do you want someone who has one thing in mind that they're going to change or fix or blow up from the inside out? Or would you rather have someone who can keep the broad view, who can look at all 7,400 of our students and say this decision is the best one for all of them? Because, as you probably know, public education is the great American experiment. We take every student who walks through our doors. We don't pick and choose. We have to represent all of them. Sometimes that means focusing a decision on those who may be left out, left behind, require additional care, additional staff because of federal standards, because of individual education plans, and so on. So I was able, throughout that campaign, to listen and to hear what people were looking for. And there were 5 open positions. There's a little math question for you. And there were 23 candidates for school board. How many of you excelled in math? Excelled in math in school? I'm not going to quiz you, I'm just curious. So,
is teaching it count?
Yes, teaching it hopefully counts, yes. So, I had a number of people, and you can agree or disagree, but they told me the best way to ensure a successful campaign was to vote only for myself and not for 4 other people along with myself. Spoiler alert, I voted for myself. But I couldn't bring myself to only vote for myself for 2 very important reasons. Now, I think mathematically they were right, because, right, if you spend your other 4 votes, then you're giving other folks a chance to catch you, right? But for 2 very important reasons, I decided to fill in all 5 ovals, because I wanted some say in the folks who were going to make decisions at that table, whether or not I was a part of that group. It was so important for me to say I would rather serve with, and not that all of the people I chose were also elected. I have my personal candidates of choice, and not all of them were elected. But whether or not I was on the board, I thought it was so important to give voice to, and this is true of your city council, it's true of your county commissioners, it's true of your park board, and so on. All of these taxing entities and agencies. And so it turns out that I was elected to the school board. And one side note about that, I actually was not in Grand Forks the day of the election. I had to participate in early voting because one of my duties at Sharon is to work with middle school students and teach them how to serve and how to volunteer, how to give back. And we find sometimes it's, for that age group, it's important to bring them out of their normal, to take them away, in a sense to go to service camp, to put their phones, leave them behind, which is the hill that I'm going to die on. They have them in their hands far too often. So we were in Duluth, Minnesota. And I'm glad that I was not in Grand Forks. And I know that sounds strange because I wasn't able to celebrate with my wife, with the rest of my family. But I was with students directly when the news came in. And as I was able to look at them and say, I did this for you. I'm working for you. I care about you. To have that direct visual reminder that these students were the why. Now, they were just some of the 7,400 students in our district, but to be able to tell them that they matter and that I wanted to do well by them and do right by them. Now, what have I learned in a year on the board? There are a number of challenges that face any district. And for the interest of easy memory, I kind of think of them as the 4 Bs. Budgets, books, buildings, and beliefs. We have roughly a $130 million budget. And the majority of that is spent on people. We have a 2-year commitment in terms of a salary agreement with our certified staff, our classified staff, our principals, and our directors. And they all negotiate about the same time. And we were lagging behind in salaries. We were able to make the single largest investment in people in the history of our district. And that's bearing fruit. We saw the numbers last night from our Director of Human Resources, Griffin Gillespie, and we have more candidates applying. We have more people wanting to be a part of our district than our comparable districts. We usually, in terms of size, compare ourselves to Bismarck, Fargo, West Fargo, Mandan, and Williston. Those are our peer districts within the state. You can also look geographically, of course. How many teachers are coming from Thompson? How many are going to Thompson? Larimore, the same thing. Sometimes across the river to Minnesota. But we are in fine shape. We don't have all of our positions hired, but we're ahead of where we were last year. And anecdotally, our HR department is telling us that the candidates are coming in because we have set the bar in terms of salary and benefits. So it's one of the things that I wanted to have a conversation about, was how do we attract talent and how do we keep talent in our district? That affects student achievement. And if school boards aren't focusing on student achievement, what are they for, really? Yes, we have to talk about our curriculum, we have to talk about our buildings, we have to talk about this big experiment, this big room where we serve all people. So I'm going to pause at this point. I have a couple more things, but I also want to be mindful of your time and your questions. How many of you have heard something so far that you want clarification about, that you're wondering about, or a question that you brought with you, or it's been nagging you, that hopefully I can address? And before I open it up for questions, let me just remind everyone that one member does not and cannot represent the board. So I can give you my perspective, because we're not in a public school building, but that's not necessarily to mean that that's the board's direction or the board's vision. And finally, to say that the school board is really about governance. We do not run the schools. The school board is designed to make sure that the schools run well, putting people in positions, putting policies in place, and letting people do the work. So with that, I'm going to pause. I have a closing piece, but I'm mindful of talking too much and listening too little, so we'll start right here.
This comes from the news last night, and I don't know if I heard it right, but they were talking about the teachers and the struggles for the different towns. Did I hear right that they said there's 22 international teachers at Red River?
So the question is about international teachers. This is the second year that our district has, in the interest of filling the gap between the number of positions and the number of candidates. We use the H-1B visa program to bring teachers here. There were 15 last year, and of those 15, 14 were retained. And there was one that had an issue with the visa, and they were not able to work through that. And there are 22 more that will arrive sometime between the first day of school and November. And the two specific things about the H-1B program, and you can learn more on the website. I'll give you the website details in a moment, because there's a lot to unpack with this and other pieces. But there's specific things about the H-1B visa where when we bring in international talent, those people cannot take the place of a United States citizen who wants that job. So many times these are hard to fill positions because of subject area, and because we need additional help in para-educators, and specifically special education para-educators. In order to get federal funding in the special education programs, we're required to have a certain number of contact hours with an adjunct, if you will, a para-educator in the classroom. And we found that attracting international talent has been able to close the gap in positions that we would not otherwise be able to fill. But more broadly, I want to direct you to two things. First of all, many of these questions, the information is available on the district website. And so I have a business card that you can grab or take a photo of. But the district's website is gfschools.org, and there's a whole section on rumor has it. Okay? I just love this because it dispels many of the myths that are out there about any number of things. So for example, right now, this section dispels some myths about the fact that now Valley Bus in East Grand Forks has the bus contract because Dietrich decided to sell their lock, stock, and barrel, literally, to Valley Bus. That H-1B visa program is a section in that rumor has it on the website. Questions about whether critical race theory is taught in the classrooms. I'll tell you that it is not. Whether or not there are litter boxes in our schools, I'll tell you there are not. And how Grand Forks District ACT scores compare to those peer districts that I mentioned, those other 5 districts. The rumor was out there that we were lagging in the average 16 or 17. That's the rumor. The truth is that of those peer districts, the 6 that I mentioned, Grand Forks, along with Bismarck, Fargo, West Fargo, Mandan, and Williston. Grand Forks, any guesses? Of the 6? First. 20.33, which also exceeds the statewide average of all districts. All districts average 19.61. So again, gfschools.org, plenty of information about the new buildings. I'm going to talk about successes, challenges, and what's coming up in a moment. But if you're looking for information, that's a great place to go. Also, statewide, the Department of Public Instruction has their Insights dashboard. You can see student achievement by district, by grade, and that's insights.nd.gov. Perhaps, Pete, I'll give you those 2 websites and you can disseminate them or we can visit afterwards, but 2 excellent sources. Anytime a conversation starts with, and I do appreciate the question, I've heard that, right? So tell me, help me make sense of that. So there are others like the 2 assistant superintendents, Matt Bakke and Catherine Galach, are more directly involved in that program than we are as school board members, but that's how it's been explained to us. Who has the next question?
Okay. I want to preface this with the fact that my kids were North End kids when they went all the way through the school system. There's a shift in demographics right now to the South End. And there's always a North End, South End balance. And how is the school board looking at that? And with projected growth that might happen with, especially at the Grand Sky, which sounds like it's going to be, that's probably going to impact the South End more than the North End.
Great question. So just to summarize that, we're asking about where the city's shifting, where the student population is, what's happening with the North End schools, what do we know, and how's the city looking out, how the school board is looking out perhaps 3 years, 5 years, 10 years. So I'll start by saying that we were a North End family. Our kids both went to West Elementary School. In fact, when we moved out of the West District, we open enrolled our daughter to West because we love that school, the neighborhood school. And a previous school referendum failed, in my opinion, and again, I do not represent the board on this, I'm just sharing with you my opinion, because the previous iteration of the Valley Middle School referendum included some consolidation and demolition of some neighborhood schools. Now we've lost West. That was a mold mitigation issue. We could talk about that a different day. But to keep Winship, and to keep Wilder, to keep Lake Agassiz where they are as they are, I think was this city's preference, rather than consolidate them into a K-8 on the North End. Now, the successful referendum, and I was a part of that steering committee and task force, is building a new Valley Middle School on that site, and that's a part of the looking forward piece that I'm going to end with. And you'll throw something at me, Pete, when I have 5 minutes, or we have 5 minutes. I don't know what the...
I'll stand up.
Perfect.
How will we know?
So, I didn't say that. I think that's a quarter. Pete, I know full well what he said is a quarter.
I will remember that.
Okay. So, our city's Student population is very level, not a huge amount of growth, but our demographic reports are solid and stable. But you're right, there is some move toward the south end. And the city does own land for a new South End elementary school that we'll probably start talking about a referendum for in the next 5, 6, 8 years. That would be the next plan. On the website, you can find out where that plot of land is specifically. There have been a couple times where other agencies have asked for a land swap, but the school board and district leadership believes that it's in the right place. So they're holding on to that land, and that neighborhood and the surrounding homes are already aware. And perhaps some of them may have chosen those homes for that reason, which is another, in my opinion, again, the board has not acted on this, but in my opinion, it's wise for us to keep the land we have rather than pull a surprise on someone in either way, right? Great question. So we have, let me just visit about Valley for just a moment because it's a part of the same piece. So if you picture the current site of Valley Middle School, which is to the east of University Park, kind of the northeast quadrant of University Park, the Park District and the school board agreed to an equal acreage land swap so that the new Valley Middle School will be just west of the existing building. So that it can be built without losing any trees, because we love the old trees in University Park. We also want to capitalize on student spaces being able to appreciate and experience the park even from inside the school. There's enough room to build a new school while Valley is operational, move students into the new Valley, demo the old school, and then that will become Park District land, football field, soccer field, extra parking, and so on. So all that's on the website as well. Thought about bringing a chart in here, but perhaps that's beyond the scope of this conversation. The design is roughed out at this point. Perhaps you have participated in the referendum, but that's about a couple years away. The other piece of that, I hear James Brown, that's a quarter. Can I do that? Is that, if I have the microphone, can I charge quarters? I'm raising money for the Lions.
It was my husband probably telling me happy birthday because he didn't tell me.
Do you really feel good? You knew that you would now? So good, so good?
Yeah, that's right.
Okay, I figured. The other piece of that referendum, actually there were two other pieces. Many people didn't know that all of the school district nutrition was produced, baked and cooked on the central kitchen, which was attached to Valley, and then trucked to all the other schools. And it became less and less efficient, partially because that neighborhood was not designed for the truck traffic required to have a central kitchen. So in a part of that process, the central kitchen is going to be moved out to the Mark Sanford Educational Center, just north of the existing administration building, which is 47th Avenue between South 20th and Columbia. And then they're working, I think it was just a city council meeting last night about how to mitigate that traffic, because there's still a residential neighborhood on one portion of that. And the third piece was safety and security upgrades to all of our schools. Some of this means controlled entrances, controlled access points, and so on. And those are rough concepts at this point, but they'll come online over the next 2 to 3 years. So it's more than you asked, but I wanted to get to some of those pieces eventually. Probably 2 or 3 more, and then I'll see if Pete throws something at me. Dwayne?
A lot of the critics of the school system and against the referendum was, we don't want to give the school system any more money because of their past sins. I don't like that. I think it makes sense. Why punish? You're punishing kids, not. So what are you finding with the financial part of it?
Yeah, so this question is about the school district finances. Has there been mismanagement in the past? Has the city been the school board been one boiler failure away from having to dip into the general fund rather than its building or emergency fund? How has someone fairly new to the board tried to navigate that? In a sense, yes, I understand this is the same school board. We have fresh ideas. But But yeah, so I have two main things to say, and then perhaps you have a follow-up. The first one is in response to some of the criticism, because it was rightly placed. I think we look at it as if this were my household, I would have some money in reserve, right? Whatever you want to call it, an operating reserve or a rainy day fund or something like that. The school board, prior to my election, had put into place what they call a guiding change document. And that document stated at the outset, in response to some of the challenges, financial challenges and building failures and so on, that by the end of the 2025 school year, so not this school year that's about to start on August 18th, but another year, the school board must have 15% of its operating budget in a reserve fund. So on a $130 million budget, you're talking roughly $20 million, 19.5. And we're tracking and trending in that direction. So as we've made all of these difficult decisions in terms of getting all of our schools to have air conditioning, which will happen not by this December, but by next. We're kind of doing some as we go. We'll talk about summer projects in a minute if we can. They're working all within this framework. So all of the decisions are not only based on do we have the money now, or can we bond, right? We had an additional 10 mils in the building fund. And so some of that is cash flow. Some of it is then the ability to bond that and borrow and do something more now. But that guiding change document is the pathway. And so let me give you a specific example of that. Last night, I don't know how many of you watch our thrilling 3.5-hour school board meetings on Monday night on YouTube. One of the things that came before us is in addition to New Valley, and in addition to a new K-8 school on the base, which is mostly federal funding because it's on a military base, we are ready to put shovels in the ground for a new Career Impact Academy, which will take root on the old Holiday Inn site on Gateway Drive, Highway 2. So just a bit northeast of the Ramada. You can picture where that is. And there's some state dollars because this idea of being choice ready when we graduate. So some of our students go to college. Some of our students want to be career ready, and some of our students want to go into the military. There's a whole framework in terms of how do we get students ready to make the right choice for them. And some of that is in career and technical education. And so a combination of state funding, local public-private partnership, and again, we could have a whole other segment just on the Career Impact Academy, but it's an exciting time, and the school district together to create this academy where students would come for a block of time. These would be electives in various fields, medical fields, automotive, oh gosh, I'll have to direct you to the website because I don't have my notes in front of me. 2-level building that allows students not only in our district but from outside districts to come in on a block schedule, 2 hours, 3 hours, take 1 or 2 courses in a field of their interest, and then return to their regular campus, either in passenger vehicle or bus. So last night we were presented with, here's what we know we can afford, okay? The state portion, the local amount, I think $11 million was raised through Team Grand Forks to match the state amount, and what can the school district afford. Here's an option for a commons area. Here's an option for a welding center, which was its own kind of connected space. Another area that there's student interest in. They did a framework. Are there students interested? Are there local companies who would support? And are there careers? Well, good paying jobs in those fields. Those were how we decided what's going to make it into this Career Impact Academy. And as a board, we decided we're only going to spend what we know we can afford. So no commons, no welding, unless Team Grand Forks, so the entities that aren't the school board, can come to the plate with some additional funds. And so we're looking creatively about that. So we decided to move forward with the design, with the bid, to start securing those contracts, because of course bids are only good for 60 days. So we need to, and the bids actually were very competitive. We're very happy with the number that came in, so we can get the work started and still explore these other possibilities. So perhaps in September or October, before we need a final decision on the dig, the footings, etc., we may be able to have sort of a reach goal, but we weren't going to promise that until we knew we could deliver the funds, because we have this document in place that says we need to be prepared for what we don't know and not just spend because that's what's in front of us. So hopefully that gives you a real example and kind of the broader framework.
Dave, you got me, about 2 minutes, so maybe time for one more quick.
Sure, one question and then I'll wrap up. Yes, sir.
When you first started your speech, you said that you have a lot of teachers you brought in and are kind of filling all the slots. Now, when you bring them in, do they follow your curriculum that you have at the school board or as the school system? Or do they teach their own thing, you give them a little bit of guidance? And the reason I say that is I have 3 kids in the school system. I'm not real excited about what you guys are doing. So, because my children aren't able to write and unable to spell a lot of words because they're not taught that in grade school. And I went to grade school, I had spelling from kindergarten all the way up through 6th, 7th grade, as a lot of people did in here. They aren't doing that now. Each teacher decides what they want to teach versus a formatted curriculum, as far as I can tell. How is that affected?
Yeah, great question. So the question is about how are teachers given guidance and training and curriculum, how much is expected of them to follow what's set up for them at the building level versus how is a teacher able to, in a sense, teach how they want or what they want. I will say not many of these questions come before the board because these issues really rest at the building level. And here's what I mean. If you have a particular worry with a teacher, that should go to the teacher supervisor, to the building administrator, to the principal, to either the assistant superintendent of elementary or secondary. At the board level, we deal with policy. So in other words, questions about critical race theory, questions about choosing a curriculum for a certain subject area, how federal funding is spent. We don't get too deep in the weeds in terms of seeing a lesson plan. For example, seeing a lesson plan would be that teacher or that cluster of teachers getting guidance from the experienced teachers, the associate principal, the principal at that school. And so from the parent perspective or the guardian perspective, what I would suggest is that you start raising those concerns at the building level, and then we'd follow that chain of command up so that if there is a challenge to a specific curriculum, a lesson plan, a method, it would come before the board when it's appropriate to come before the board. I know that's not much of an answer, but I'm giving you the framework for where those concerns should be placed.
Oh no, I know that starts at the grade, but the policies that the school board puts in effect trickle down to each class or each area, high school, middle school, grade school. Those are the policies to adapt and they go from there. So that's my issue. So thanks.
Dave, thank you. Our time is up. And on behalf of South Forks Lions, here's a pen for you. And I expect to see that on your desk when I visit you in your office. So please thank Dave for being here. I'm sure, I know Dave, he's very accessible, so if you got a question, get a hold of him.
Yeah, I'll be around until the last person leaves. I've got business cards as well if you want to reach out. And would love to talk to you about where the district's headed. There are some issues and some successes that we didn't get to, but I appreciate your concern and your shared care for our community. Thank you.